the delicious recap, Family Matters. I'm Jon Francois. Who are you?
I am Ajay Vandertunt.
Yes, and we have a great guest today, Rob Rasner. Currently, if you follow him, say on @RasnerMagic on Instagram, you'll see his wonderful current work as a comedic magician. He happens to have a wonderful history as a background player on Family Matters. I think roughly seasons 4 through seasons 8, he was asked back for a good number of episodes. So we talk about that. We talk about his various other experiences with Sybil Shepherd, Bruce Willis, the sitcom Martin, a certain iconic movie with Tom Hanks. He almost was going to do that, but he chose the lovely Family Matters instead. Yeah, it is a great conversation. Am I leaving anything out that we talked to him about that was so delicious?
No, you haven't left anything out. And I just had something confirmed for me that I have wondered for years about Sybil Shepherd. So I'm walking away with the gem.
Yep. So without further ado, Rob Rasner right now. Well, hey, thank you for spending some time with us. And
sure, I made a bunch of notes last night of episodes I had done. It sparked 100 memories of things that happened on the set, behind the scenes, things people didn't know about, conversations I had with people, specific episodes that you guys will know very well, and where they were filmed or what happened during that time behind the scenes, little incidents behind the scenes. Yeah, and the episodes that I was in. So that's why I sent you those pictures, because in the episodes I'll say, you'll see me doing this, or spot me doing that, or like one of them I was the nerd, and I'll talk about that too. And awesome. So you might want to pop those pictures up there. Yeah, we weren't allowed to bring point and shoot cameras in those days because it shot on the Warner Brothers lot, and as you walked on with security, they looked through your bags.
Yeah. So of course the show we're talking about is Family Matters, and let's just go back to the beginning, because I mean nowadays you're known for your wonderful comedy magician work, but how did it all start with you getting this acting and background work back in the day?
So starting when I was I'd gone to community college, and I'd always known that I wanted to be an actor, and I was born and raised in Riverside, California, which is about an hour and a half east of Los Angeles. And I had always wanted to be an actor and studied theater and music in high school. And so they were filming a movie in my hometown about an hour and a half down the road called Calendar Girls, starring Jason Priestley. And I went down there with my friend wanting to be in the movie, and they said, no, you have to sign up. Maybe you could do background work, but you have to sign up at this place. Well, I had never heard of it. We looked it up. And so my first 2 or 3 years in LA, I decided to make the move out there. And my first 2 or 3 years in LA, as I was auditioning for speaking roles and doing things like that, I actually ended up doing a lot of background roles where I was in the schools or in the scenes with the actors at some of the most famous TV shows, Family Matters, of course. Beverly Hills 90210 was one of the original background during their senior year. Let's see, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, a lot of very popular shows back then. And then a couple years later, I graduated to speaking roles. And although I was doing a lot of television commercials and speaking roles, occasionally I would go back and do background. So that's why I appeared in a few later episodes of Family Matters. Not as much later, but then I went on to do speaking roles. And then around that time, around the late 90s, I was doing a lot of commercials. I had a lot of free time because the money was good. And my ex-wife said, ex-girlfriend at the time, she said, you need to take up some classes or something because you're driving me crazy, because I would sit around and do nothing. And so I started studying, they had a magician teaching at the community college, started studying that and turned it into a full-time business where I'm now traveling and performing all over the world doing comedy magic on cruise ships. But I still work in television. That's why I'm in Atlanta now. And I did a KFC commercial a few years ago, but I want to go back to the beginning and talk about my very beginning roots when I got to work on some of the most iconic television shows, namely Family Matters. And I got a bunch of stories for you.
Yeah. Now, for anybody who may be wanting to get into background work, I mean, are there like any prerequisites that you need to have to be a background actor?
No, there are background agencies all over the planet nowadays, especially in the major cities that You just Google background extra work. You just mainly want to realize that no agency will ever take a fee or ask you for any money. They're protected by, if you're in the Screen Actors Guild, of course, you're very protected. And I was blessed enough to get that pretty quickly. But if not, there's no fee or anything like that. You just simply have a reliable vehicle and go get down to the agency, get your picture taken, and they'll call you. As soon as I moved to Atlanta, they contacted me here to work on a handful of shows. And it was in between contracts on the ships, and I was going to do it. But unfortunately, I'm in the union, and they didn't have union work for me. But there's plenty of work out there.
So I wonder if there's like a lottery of background roles and you get to like maybe choose which one you want, or does the agency just say, okay, here's a role that's available?
Basically, back in the old days, you would call in and say, hey, I'm available tomorrow. And they would say, what's your unique PIN number? And then they'd pull up your picture and they say, hey, such and such wants to know if you want to work on Clueless tomorrow or whatever. Or do you want to work on Family Matters? And then they will choose you to work on that particular thing. Nowadays, everything is online, from what I understand, where they will ask you, hey, do you want to, this is what I understand now, is they'll tell you online, are you available for this and that? And you just submit your picture on through maybe, I think, what are the sites called that do that? Because they do speaking roles as well. There's like actorsaccess.com and LA Casting. I think it's Actors Access, Casting Networks. That's the one. And you can speaking roles, background roles, etc. And that brings me to a good story. I remember it was a couple years into my doing background. I had worked on Family Matters a bunch, and I really enjoyed it. And then one day I got called to do a fitting for this movie. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go do this fitting for a movie. And they said it's going to take place in the 1960s. I said, okay. So I go down and I fit, and they put me in these funky clothes. And then they say, okay, it's supposed to work this day. And then they said, hey, they're going to switch to days. We can have you work one day on this movie, or would you rather do 2 days on Family Matters? And I said, I think I'd rather do 2 days on Family Matters. I don't feel like working on that Andy Gump toilet movie. Forrest Gump. I have a Polaroid of me dressed in the outfit. I was supposed to be a college student right up in the front when they did the segregation of the schools episode where Forrest runs out and hands the young lady her books and all that. I skipped that day because I didn't want to work on the Andy Gump. I thought that was a dumb name. Gump something. So I said, I'll do Family Matters instead. So I did 2 days on Family Matters. And I skipped that.
So was it partially because the pay was lower to work as a background on Forrest Gump?
No, to me, I didn't know what this silly name of a dumb movie was at the time because it hadn't come out yet. And it was, do you want to work 1 day or 2 days? And I thought, well, I'd rather work 2 days on a television show I'm familiar with than some dumb, silly, weird name of a movie. I thought I'd work on the guaranteed popular, already known thing. And I still have my Polaroid to this day, and I can actually find that for you. I do know where that is, of me in the fitting for Forrest Gump in the fitting outfits. I do have Polaroids of that kind of stuff.
So cut to Forrest Gump obviously winning the Oscars and just being this iconic movie. How did you feel when you found out that?
Stupid. Because one of my friends who was a background at that time, they ended up giving him a line in that movie when he's meeting the president. He says, how does it feel to be All-American? He got to say, pretty good, sir. And he made quite a bit of money off of that one line. And and God rest his soul, he just recently passed young. We had the best time doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with, Hollywood, it's a gamble. You never know what's going to hit. You never know what's going to miss. So, yeah, it's bound to happen. So, let's dive into your background work on Family Matters. So your relationship with the show began with you being associated with the agency, and then they just said, hey.
They would say, do you want to do 90210 this week? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do whatever shows that time? And I was rotating between 90210, Family Matters, and the third show they used to put me on, a show called Life Goes On back in the time with Kelly Martin. And then that was the show about the one with the kid that had special needs that was in the family. So I worked on that a lot. And Family Matters shot very close to my house at Warner Brothers Studios. And the very first episode that I worked on was the episode where the grandmother was getting married. Does this ring a bell? Okay.
Yeah,
That one did not shoot at Warner Brothers. Oh, no, what? You know what? It didn't shoot at Warner Brothers. I believe that shot at Culver City. Sony. I believe that shot in Culver City. I think Family Matters, was it Warner Brothers later? It definitely started out at Culver City. And I remember that because the day we shot that, we had shot a long day. And I remember being in a little tuxedo amongst the wedding guests, or a little suit, and standing up near them and watching them handle that sweet old lady with, they were so nice to her and stuff. And I remember that specific day leaving the Sony lot, my car battery had died and I had a stick shift. So I had to wait till everyone cleared out and then have another person help me roll the car and then jump the axle to get going.
Oh my God.
Hollywood days. Yeah, it was fun. That was my first episode.
Yeah. So, and actually, I was wondering who you were in that episode, because I thought you were one of the casually dressed friends of Eddie who he invited to the party, because I know he mistakenly scheduled the party for the same day as Mama Winslow's backyard wedding. So, but you're saying that you were one of the more formally dressed people.
I don't remember. I remember being in the backyard wedding. I may not have been in a suit. Maybe I was one of Eddie's friends, one of Darius's friends. Yeah, probably one of his friends. I don't remember what I was wearing, but I do remember being at the wedding. So in those days, I was a lot of the time what they call 18 to look younger, where you're legally of 18, but you can play younger. And so I was more than likely one of his friends. That one I don't have too much recollection on, but a lot of them I do. The ones I'm going to go over, I do.
Gotcha. Now, this first episode that you appeared on with Family Matters, it also happened to be the final appearance of Judy Winslow, and her exit has always been much discussed and debated as years went by. I wonder if at the time you had observed anything that hinted that Judy would not be coming back, or was it just another day? Or
no, everything was fine. It was just another day. I just remember she was being very well taken care of and doted upon, and she was very, very kind. The actress was very kind.
Jamie Foxworth.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any chance to talk at length between scenes or about anything?
No, and I no. I mean, just casual. Hello, how are you? How's the weather? That kind of thing. She was always really nice. I did not see any trouble there at all. Nothing.
Right.
Never saw that.
And any memories that you have in as far as the
there wasn't even, you know what? With all that stuff going on with her, there wasn't even talk. There wasn't rumors. There was nothing. Everything seemed fine and normal. I think it was just the way the show played out, and then I think the way they wrote things. How Jaleel ended up being a series regular, and then Shavar got longer, and maybe her character decided to get shorter. I think her issues maybe, and I can't guess for anybody, but they may have happened afterward, but it had nothing to do with that. They weren't coincided.
Anything you particularly noticed about the pace, the way that Family Matters shoots an episode, how the director did something, or how this scene was shot, or how long the day was, anything that really struck you?
The days were always around 8 to 12 hours, and they were very just a standard three sitcom camera, they would 3 camera shoot. So they would usually do 2 to 3 or 4 takes each. I think Monday through Wednesday, the cast would come in and do a table read, and then we would pop in on Thursday and do a run through without the live audience and film everything. And then on Friday, we'd film in front of the live audience. And I remember that they usually had their lines so well down on Friday that would run like clockwork. And I remember Jaleel, this is long before he did Stefan and all that, he wanted the audience to know that he really wasn't the Urkel character. So what he would do, this is before they revealed, that was later that he asked to show who he really is. But I remember he'd always be, during the tapings when it wasn't his scene, he'd always be in his dressing room with the door open, and he'd have I don't know if it was Nintendo 64 or something at that time that was the hottest game system. He'd always been playing on this big monitor, and he'd invite people to come back and hang and stuff. And then he would come out in front of the studio audience and grab the mic and then go from Urkel to Jaleel quickly, and just to show the studio audience, hey, this isn't who I am. Another show I'd worked on back years ago was that 70s show, and I remember Wilder Valderrama, or how you pronounce his name, he would also do the same thing. He would go to the studio audience and talk to them. I always remember he'd talk to them to show them that he doesn't really talk like that. So they wanted to make sure that people knew. But yeah, I'll tell you, Jaleel, I bumped into him probably about, 6 or 7 years ago at a bar in LA. And he's looked at me and said, "Hey, man, I don't remember names, but I know your face." He goes, "How are you?" And I said, "Good." And he talked to me for 2 or 3 minutes, and I told him about the magic. And he's so nice and so genuine and kind. And he said, "I don't remember your name, but I'll never forget a face. And how are you? What have you been up to?" And very, very appreciative. He's a good dude.
Wow. And I was actually going to ask, like, what about Jalil's personality did he display in between shooting those Family Matters scenes that you noticed was like more different than the Urkel character? But it seems like you kind of answered it by saying
he would go back and play his Xbox or Nintendo. He'd always joke around. He was always kind to everyone. He would talk to the audience a lot. And usually when you're filming in front of a live audience, the cast won't go all the way up to the stands because it's separated by about 30 feet, but he would walk all the way up there and start talking to the fans and reach up and shake hands and sign things and joke around. And of course he's wearing those silly overalls. All that stuff. He's wearing all that stuff, but he's great, man. He was great. They were all really cool.
Whoever directed the Mama Winslow wedding episode, does the director come and give specific directions to each background actor? Like, hey, act this way.
No, they do it loud at once. They'll say, okay, at the beginning, they have what's called a second assistant director. So the director will give them instructions. That'll go to the second AD, which is the second assistant director. And they'll come over and they say, okay, background, in this scene, such and such is going to happen. And we want you to be sad. Or this is a party. Here's what's going on. And then when this happens, turn around and look. We were doing a turn around and look a lot on Family Matters. And sometimes they'll give you instructions and it doesn't make any sense until you see it on television. You're like, why? This is ridiculous. And then it makes sense because you may be filming a small piece of a scene and you don't understand why you're saying or doing something or pretending to do something until you see the actual episode. So that one, I just remember milling about amongst the party and talking to the guests. And I think, it was a very simple, that wasn't that long of a day because I think Mama Winslow wasn't there for that long because she had it in her, I don't know what her deal was, but it seemed like she didn't have long days back in those days.
Yeah, I mean, even in season 1, Andrew and I, in recapping the show, we're noticing that like Mama Winslow just sporadically appears here and there throughout the 9 seasons of the show. So it's interesting that you bring that up. Yeah. Any other memories from that particular episode that is worth sharing? Any interactions with cast members or anything like that?
Not that one. Because I don't know if it was that episode or when. And I can't remember his name. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The little boy. What was his name with the curly hair?
Brian McClure, the one who played a grown-up Richie.
Yeah. Was he in that episode?
I think so, Andrew, right?
The wedding?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. He was in the wedding episode.
That's what I remember. Okay, because he was a little adult at the time, and he would walk back. I remember seeing him back at the craft service table and the snacks and just talking to his mom, and he was a little adult. He was just a little grown up, and I thought, man, that kid is so smart, and he would go and get his food and whatever and just hang out and be patient till it was his time to do anything. That was when he was growing up. Now, I can't remember, because this is a funny story too. They had a little kid on there or maybe it was when Richie was younger. It was when Richie was younger, yeah. So one of the funny stories on there, I'll tell you a little behind the scenes thing, is they had what's called stand-ins on there. And what the stand-ins jobs were to do was to deliver the actor's dialogue, and then they would but record the sound and the lighting bounce off of the stand-in. So once they got the marks correct and the lighting correct, they would go back and say, okay, what's called first team, which is the main actors, and they would come in and film their scenes. And I remember one of the funniest things was during Family Matters taping on Thursday, when the audience wasn't there, when they were working with just the stand-ins, we would go and sit in the stands where the audience sat and we would watch them filming with the stand-ins. Well, because stand-ins work longer hours, they have to be adults. But because they're stand-ins for children, they would usually hire little people. And one of the funniest things that I ever saw was the stand-in for Richie is a little person, and he's saying lines like, "You duty head."
Wow.
I love that.
And I ran into him on a different show years later, and I said, you used to stand on Family Matters and say, duty had all the time. And he goes, yes, I did.
Oh my God. Now, I think you said your second appearance on Family Matters was the season 4 episode A Thought in the Dark, even though it seemed like it aired before what was your first episode, which was Mama Winslow's wedding. So I guess they kind of shot these episodes out of order.
So I don't think they shot them out of order. That was definitely Mama Winslow's wedding is my first one, but I found in my notes ones that I had done that I had forgotten about. One of the most ones that I was going to tell you about, one of my favorites, and maybe they did shoot them out of order, but one of them was the food fight. That was a very memorable day.
Which episode in season that?
I don't know. We filmed it it would have been filmed in somewhere in about 1993, and Urkel started a food fight in the cafeteria. Do you know which one we're talking about?
I don't. No. I couldn't find that one specifically. So what brought that on? And it sounds like you were one of the people in the cafeteria that got to participate.
Right. So I'll tell you about that, and then we'll back up a little bit because I remember one that happened before that. But the food fight one was very difficult because, just as I said before, they said, okay, the background agency said, hey, can you bring clothes that you're willing to throw away? Are you comfortable doing a food fight? We'll give you extra money. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal. It was a big deal. So they said, this is an episode where it's in the school cafeteria and Urkel yells, food fight. And then we all start throwing food. And I remember they came out and they brought tons of food on different plates, different kinds of food from pudding to everything. And then because the way they shot this, the sound stage would come out like this, and then it looks like the back of this cafeteria, but actually what's behind you is this, you've seen this before. It's the stands where the audience is and the cameraman. So they also gave food to the cameraman. So they're throwing at us inward. So I thought, I would sit back a little bit so that people are always throwing that way. Nothing's going to come from this direction, which I was wrong. And so when they started throwing the food, we were covered in it. And of course, the actors and all the principal people at the time, they got to go and back to their dressing rooms and shower. And they said, okay, you guys, that's a wrap. I'm covered in food. Like, what are we going to do? And I was still commuting to LA from Riverside at the time. It was a good hour and a half drive. And I had to throw my clothes away because when you take a ton of food and you mix it together, it smells like vomit.
Oh, God.
On the soundstage floor, it was about that thick worth of food people were trudging through. We literally had to take our clothes and try to clean up in the bathroom and throw them in the trash because it was disgusting. But that was one of the more memorable episodes of just taking anything you can think of and throwing it at the person in front of you and dumping on girls' heads and, people throwing things. Somebody put a pie in my face or somebody else's face. I didn't get a pie in the face. It was gross,
Wow. So it speaks to the big difference between how the speaking star actors were treated versus how the non-speaking background players were treated.
Well, yes. At that time, they always treat the background fairly well. But at that time, because of what we were doing, they didn't have enough showers. Because I remember later in my background career, much later, I was on a movie called Pearl Harbor. And during that time on Pearl Harbor, we were one of the GIs that was bombed by the Japanese. And so we were covered in soot. And they each gave us showers to line up and clean up. But for whatever reason, on that lot, they didn't have on the Sony lot, they didn't have the particular things to do it with us. They said, okay, you're going home. And I think it was also, I think I might have been union at that time. I just remember it was awful. It was gross. But maybe Mama Winslow's episode wasn't the first one I filmed because I was telling you about the Dave Koz episode.
Yeah. So that's the Thought in the Dark episode that I was referring to. And that's actually also, Andrew, it's Myra Monkhouse's very first episode. What were your, and I saw you, Rob, right. Sitting right behind Steve and Myra at the concert right. with your colorful concert.
Yeah.
Tell me of your memories being right behind.
I remember that very well. I was going to get to that one. That may have been my first one because that was filmed. I'll never forget this. That was filmed on Election Day of 92. Yeah. So it was all the talk amongst everybody, including the cast. Was it going to be, I believe at that time, Bush or Clinton? That's what everybody was talking about that day because the results were coming in. And we sat in the stands all day. And I remember I had spoken to Michelle Thomas a bunch of times, the late Michelle Thomas, Myra. And I'll tell you, that woman was one of the kindest people I've ever met. She was so appreciative and treated everybody like they were important. She was always like that. And she couldn't have been more, quote unquote, more normal. Same with Jaleel. He was very cool. Jaleel's kind of more on and would joke around, but Michelle was so kind. And I remember that was a long shooting day. And I remember the whole talk that day was about the election and people's thoughts. And, oh, this guy just played the saxophone on Arsenio Hall show, which was Clinton.
Yeah,
and it was all back and forth. And that was her first episode. And when Urkel gets up and says something, we're supposed to be like, what are you doing? They told us, act like you're annoyed. Like, what's this guy doing? And that Dave Koz episode. And then Dave Koz came up, and I wasn't familiar with him at the time, but he came up and talked to everyone, and he was kind. And Jaleel would stand up and turn around and talk to the audience at once, all the extras and stuff. He was cool. So
wow. I wonder if there was any talk, because even though Michelle, being a small person, can play young and sort of teenagery very well, I think she was 25 and Julia was 17 at the time, and they were playing love interest. I wonder if there was any concern or any chatter backstage about that, or was it just, oh, Michelle looks young, whatever?
No, there was never talk about it. If there was, it would not be privy to our ears. They would never make it public. But I just remember thinking she was young, but very adult-like, and she was very nice. She was very, very nice. And it was very different. I talked to her then, and the only other time I talked to her was an episode where we were all in the locker room together wearing what would have been the school's clothes, our white T-shirts and red shorts. I remember this, maroon shorts, and Urkel's towel snapping or getting towel snapped. And she comes out of a locker, I want to say. She's in the boys' locker room. I don't know if this sounds familiar, but anyway, she was standing around all day, and I was standing next to her, and she just struck up a conversation. I mean, she's real nice. She's real normal, and we were joking around about the ridiculous PE uniforms we had to wear and whatnot. And she was nice, and she had remembered me and, a little bit, and we chatted for a second. And it was, that was very sad because she was one of the good ones.
Yeah.
She was definitely one of the good ones. The other one that I chatted with, a handful of times was Shafar Ross. And we know him from Different Strokes and whatnot. That's another example of an extreme character that was very, very kind, very kind. He's, he couldn't be more normal and whatnot and different than that character. He was a good dude.
What was Shafar Ross's character name? Do you know? He was one of Eddie's wacky friends. I don't know.
What's his name? The other one opposite of Waldo.
Teddy? Miles?
Like Weasel or something. I can't remember. Oh, it's going to drive me crazy.
I forgot what his name was.
Let me look it up. Hold on.
I'm looking it up too. Weasel. Yeah, Weasel. And then I guess he also played Alex. So I think he was two different characters across 13 episodes from 92 to 94.
Yeah, I remember working with him when he was Weasel. And then I worked with him again on an episode that I was actually helping. I wasn't in the episode. I was helping with on a show called Chicago Hope. He did a one day on that as a drummer. And I said, wow, that's a different character because he's like a kid he was a drummer in a marching band that had gotten hurt in a bus accident. So it was completely straight role, but yeah, he was really great. And then Darius McCurry, he was a really neat too. I remember I would always be jealous of him because I remember him pulling into the lot all the time in this, I know we started at Sony. It must have finished at Warner Brothers because I remember it was at Warner Brothers. He'd pull in like this black Mercedes. He always had a black Mercedes. And it was all rims and like nice, and he was just suave, just real suave and confident. He was never rude to anybody. He's always confident and kind. And then I know this is a terrible question to do on this podcast because the fans are going to kill me. What was the name of Urkel's love interest?
Laura.
Yeah, I never spoke to her too much. Never got to speak to her too much, or the Winslows in general. I was mostly always in scenes with the other ones. This is one of my favorite episodes that we got to do. And this will give you a good open curtain of behind the scenes. We've shot a scene where Urkel was in a high school play. Okay. And I don't, looking back, what I remember about the scene was the teacher wore a weave and Urkel accidentally hit a giant circular fan and it blew the teacher's weave off. Does this make sense?
I have not seen that episode, but wow. So that was intentional, or was that like an accident?
No, it was this. No, I'm going to get to the behind the scenes. In the scene, we are theater students setting up for a high school play. And Urkel accidentally is involved in the high school play somehow, and there's supposed to be a giant, huge circular fan to create wind, and Urkel leans on it and knocks it over, one of those "did I do that" kind of moments, and he hits this fan, and then all hell breaks loose, and the wind is blowing everywhere, and we're being blown away, and the teacher's weave blows off, and then she falls down. So in filming that, we had to do several takes. And one of the things I'll never forget was when we were doing that, the director said, "Make chaos. This fan is going to go off. We need you to pretend that the air is twice as much as it is." And I sent you a picture of me in a plaid hoodie. It's black and white, but in that plaid hoodie, it's actually, that plaid hoodie is green and gray. Okay. And so that's what I'm wearing in that episode. And what's funny about that, because there's only a handful of us in that scene, what's funny about that is the wind actually was so powerful that the hoodie, it was open, it blew off. And one of my friends that was in the scene ended up with his arm in the other arm. It's like two of us were wearing it. And we fell down and knocked over each other so much. And I got knocked down that when I looked up, I was actually underneath the teacher whose weave flew off, and she was wearing a dress.
Wow.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Yes, this big woman. I look up, surprise, and I'm like, that's not what I want to see today. I'm good.
Oh, my God.
We filmed that, and I'm like, and I'm stuck in the other part of the coat, and we're trying to crawl out. And anyway, so what was going on during that scene is I remember that particular director wasn't exactly patient, and that starting that day, I remember I had a fever, and they had set up this high school auditorium. It was completely fake on the soundstage, and the row of chairs were like movie chairs, and they're bolted together, but they weren't nailed down, so you can sit in them fine. And so that particular day, I had a little bit of a fever. So in between scenes, I went to lay down in the chairs across a row of them, and they all collapsed forward onto the ground. And he came over and said, "Who's making noise, blah, blah." I said, "I'm sorry, I laid down," and blah, blah. He says, "Don't do that again, or you're, whatever." So we get into the scene. We're filming the scene where Urkel and Myra and everybody, and he causes havoc. This high school auditorium is fake. It's on a soundstage, and there's a giant theater curtain, like a normal one, and then a wall. Well, the wall wasn't real, and I didn't know that because it looks real. So later, as we're filming this throughout the day, I leaned up against the wall, and the whole wall goes, and brought a light down with it. And he goes, "Who did that?" And I knew that if he knew it was me, I was going to get fired right then and there, and that'd have been a bad thing. So I immediately stepped over 2 feet to my left, wrapped myself up in the high school curtain, and then put one leg up in there. And I was thinking, please don't look at my shoe. Please don't see my shoe. Please don't see my shoe. I'm going to get fired. Yeah. And then, of course, they put the wall back up, and he says, "I swear if I find out who did that, they're going to be fired." He never knew it was me, but oh my God.
Well, I was just wondering now, hearing a lot of your stories, being in the background and being on these different sets, when you were on the Family Matters set, was there anything that you saw that you would have loved to have made it into an episode, or is there something that was cut from the episodes you were in that we don't know about?
Yeah, one of the episodes that I really enjoyed was, this is where that nerd picture comes in, is in the early to mid 90s. One of the things that I got to do, I made myself well known for playing a nerd on television. I put on the glasses. I did the new Saved by the Bell. I did Full House, different episodes where I was the nerd. And so I had that picture taken and would submit to the agencies. And so I got chosen for the episode of Family Matters where Urkel goes to college, like a computer college.
Yeah, season 8. Moving on.
So that was, are we that far already? Yeah, there's a giant fake wall for us. Yeah. So when we were in that scene, they had stunt people dressed like nerds, and we were in a college where Urkel I believe he bumped into a bookshelf or something, and everything came falling down.
Yeah. It was an ending scene, and Urkel was about to go back to the Winslows because he got homesick. He went off to college for a little bit, and then it was just this big physical comedy catastrophe where he just bumps into everything, bumps into everybody, things come crashing down. And I saw you in that scene. You were one of the nerds that got physically affected by that scene.
Also, my good friend Deontay was in that, and he was the stand-in and double for years for Why can't I think of his name? Scrubs. What is his name? Not Zach Braff. Zach Braff. What is his name? Why do I not know? Donald Faison. He was Donald's double and good friend. And so Deontay was one of the nerds as well. And we were standing there. And what happened when we filmed that was a very watered down version, because when we filmed it, they had stuntmen there dressed as nerds, which is, by the way, a riot, because you see them come in and they're all buffed up, and then they go change and they come back as nerds because they had their union contracts. But it was a lot worse when we filmed it. They watered it down quite a bit because people could have gotten hurt and stuff. All kinds of things were falling. They made it a lot worse. And then they said, okay, we're going to back this up. And then I think what we ended up shooting was he bumps into a shelf, if I remember correctly, and that hits something else and a table flips or something like that. But yeah, I was in that one as well. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think that was the last one I did, because at that time I was getting busy with speaking roles and moving on to doing magic and whatnot at that time. But
what were your memories of being directed by Rich Correll? Because I know that he directed that Moving On episode where Steve goes to college.
Yeah, he's very professional. And Rich is a good guy. He's a really good guy and a mutual friend of ours, Kelly and whatever. He's he's just cool and laid back and meticulous, and he had tons of ideas, super creative. And he would say like, okay, let's try it this way. And then he would tell Jaleel, you know what, let's try doing it this way. Now, a lot of directors, when they will tell the actors what they want, but he was always good at, if an actor had an idea or a specific thing like that, he would say, okay, well, what do you want to do? You know, what do you like to do? And they would have an idea. So Jaleel will come back with an idea and he'd say, yeah, let's try that. If it doesn't work, we'll just, go back to what we're doing. But he was very cool. Yeah, he's a good dude.
Doing the work that you've done, working with Family Matters and other shows in background, is there anything that you've done in your background career that you felt helped build a bridge to get you further in your career?
No, probably the opposite. Being featured on background may have probably been a negative thing for some things, other than creating lifelong memories and working on some of the most iconic shows. I remember one time I had worked, like I said, on 90210 in their senior year of high school. And then fast forward 2 years, I was booking principal roles, and I had auditioned for a co-star role on 90210, and I got all the way to the network. And Jason Priestley, who I used to talk to all the time on the set, was directing that episode, and Aaron Spelling was in the room. And I walked in to do my thing, and Jason Priestley said, oh, hey, this guy used to work with us all the time. Hey. And then all of a sudden, my audition went from being important to being, oh, big deal. And so later, I bumped into Jason, and I said, hey, did that hurt me? And I said, tell me the truth. And he said a little bit, because we knew you as just a background guy. And I said, well, does it hurt to do background if you want to be a serious actor? And he said, it doesn't hurt, but you were featured all the time. If you can go and do it to make extra money and keep your head buried in a newspaper, it helps you to look around and learn and watch the greats doing what they're doing and see where the marks are in the lighting. It'll help you at that. But you don't want to be seen by the important people, because they will peg you as that. Mm-hmm. Go to set to learn and to see how it all works, so that when you're on camera speaking for the first time, you won't be nervous. And that helped me, because my very first big speaking role was on Saved by the Bell, the new class. Mm-hmm. And I remember we were filming in front of a live audience. And the second it was time to say my dialogue, as a nerd, of course, I played Vern. The red light on the camera went on. The cameras pointed to me, and I saw the studio lights on me. Now, had I not done background, I would have buckled with nervousness. But because I was so used to that, I was fine. And I did a good performance, went on. So it didn't help me or bridge anything, but it did create lifelong memories and lifelong friendships. I got to work on iconic movies and television shows and see very famous actors behind the scenes. Here's an example of a life-changing thing. I was dancing on The Martin Show. Remember Martin Lawrence Show?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was dancing, and a very famous person pointed at me and said, look at white boy try to dance between scenes. And that famous person was Notorious B.I.G. Biggie Smalls looked at me and said, look at white boy try to dance.
Yeah, that is amazing.
It was incredible. So it had life-changing experiences during that 92 to 95-ish time working on these shows. Yeah, it was cool.
Did you ever get to strike up a conversation with Notorious B.I.G. after that?
No,
comment?
Because he was very famous at the time, and he was sitting on a couch with his cane, and he was kind of with his entourage, his entourage they brought to set. But I just remember on the dance floor, because when they film, you'll notice that whenever they film any movies or television, especially back in those days, we were 18 to look younger at a prom, and you're dancing to music, they have to record the dialogue. So they'll go, and action, and you'll hear the music play for like 6 or 8 seconds, and then the music will stop, and you have to continue dancing as if the music's still going while the actors are speaking their dialogue. So you're literally dancing to no music. So we're doing this scene on the Martin show, and we're dancing, and then they cut, and we're still, dancing, and they go cut, and he just started cracking up, and he goes, look at white boy try to dance. It was awesome. I was like, Biggie Smalls just made fun of me. It's great. Yes. Because I can't dance. But so there's things like that, life-changing memories. And also I did make a lot of connections during that time to people that went on to very successful careers. So how maybe it did bridge is one of our fellow background people at the time is one of the biggest, I don't know if he wants people to know he did background at the time, but one of the biggest producer directors now has a lot of films out through Lionsgate that threw me in a couple of his movies, and we're still good friends this day. Things like that. Another guy I met on the set doing background was part of a 98 Degrees, the boy band. So a lot of things happened during that time.
The background work that you did on Family Matters from like season 4 through season 8 was, and having you become the background player in those episodes, was it because it's like, oh, the show wants to establish some consistency and certain people appearing
Not really. They would say how it would work was in between, like I would go on auditions and do my thing, and in between speaking roles, the agent would reach out and say, do you want to work? You would reach out to them and say, hey, I want to work. And they said, we have a handful of shows, like I said, Forrest Gump or whatever, do you want to work on tomorrow? And I always knew, Family Matters. Sometimes they put it out and say, you could never have worked Family Matters before because they're filming in a place that I wouldn't be at. Like, I remember one time on 90210, I wanted to work the next day, and they said, no, they're filming at a different school that you wouldn't go to. And we've seen you too much in this school. So they like the fact that you're familiar. And so you'd go, and the AD would instantly recognize you, say, okay, you're a student today, or okay, you're, this today or whatever. So they would need specific. It wasn't that you were established. It was that you could be there and whatnot.
Any thing you noticed in terms of the quality of the show, like the more you kept guesting? Because, over the span of like the 4 years that you've appeared in Family Matters episodes, I'm pretty sure you may have pointed out like, oh, okay, this is different
One thing that I noticed about them was that cast had, and this is very unusual, but that cast had their dialogue down. They a lot of the times you would be on sets where you'd famous sets too. We'd be like, I cannot believe such and such doesn't know their lines. They were always professional and prepared, especially the elder Winslows. They had their lines down all the time. And they're extremely professional and kind. They had a spinoff show from Family Matters called On Our Own.
Did they?
Yeah.
Featuring who?
Jussie Smollett and his brothers and sisters.
Oh,
yeah.
Wait. So how were they on Family Matters, and how did they get their spinoff?
You know what? I don't quite know. I don't know if that was a spinoff. Were they on this? I think. Okay. Don't quote me on that. I think it was a spinoff. What it was called was Jussie Smollett was one of a bunch of brothers, sisters, a whole bunch of them in real life. He has tons of brothers and sisters, a bunch of them. And it was a series that he was on with his real life brothers and sisters. He was little at the time. And they were orphaned together in a series. And if it wasn't a spinoff of Family Matters, it was by the same production company. And I worked on that show as well. It may have been the same production company, but I worked on that show as well. And maybe because they weren't experienced and they're a real family, but it was a big difference in learning, dialogue. Like those Family Matters were pros. They all had it down all the time. They were on. Even the small characters like Shavar Ross, he'd been in films since he's little. They had it. And like I said, even Richie or whatever is like a little 30-year-old at the time.
Andrew, do you remember this spinoff idea? Because I don't recall anything like that.
I don't remember it being a spinoff, but I do remember seeing On Our Own. It was in 94, so I was still pretty young at the time.
Yeah.
But I would have been like 7 or 8. And I know I've seen it, but like I remember seeing it. I just remember some of the cast. I don't remember the show itself, though.
Yeah, it's news to me. Oh, my God.
wasn't a spinoff, that it was by the same production company because the same casting director and everything seemed to intertwine. And I remember working between the two sets was a whole difference in the level of production. I just remember Family Matters was easy set to work on. Everybody was, I got another funny story for you. Okay. Everybody was really, really nice and kind on Family Matters, except for one guy. And he wasn't mean, but he was grumpy.
Name names.
I'm gonna. His name. He worked in the electrical department, and his name was Lars. Okay, so he's not on the show, but he was grumpy all the time, and he was grumpy all the time, and he would kind of get mad at people walking by. Don't step through this. And so I remember one time I was walking through, and there was the electrical lights up. He hadn't hung them right or hadn't finished yet. So I started walking by in the backstage, and I went to look up or whatever, and he goes, "Oh, don't walk under the hot lights," or something like that. He goes, "Guys, don't look up, keep moving." So I kept moving. So one day, about a week later, my friend and I had worked on the set. We're working on the next downstage over. This was at Warner Brothers. They must have moved the filming. And we were filming Hanging with Mr. Cooper. Okay. And so we wrapped on Hanging with Mr. Cooper, and we said, let's go over to Family Matters and say hi to our friends, because we've got to have friends that are over there. Because a lot of times you knew your friends would be on different sets. So we stopped by the soundstage, opened the door, and there's nobody on the soundstage. And in the soundstage, you have like the high school, you have the Winslow living room, have all these different soundstages. So we open the door, and all there is the seating for the studio audience, and nobody's in there except for one person, and it's Lars, right? And he's working on the lights, and we're like, let's mess with Lars. So he thinks he's in there by himself. So we sneak under the bleachers, and we go, "Hey, Lars." And he goes, "Hey, why are you such a dick?" We're going, "Hey, Lars." And he goes, Who's there? Who's there? It's a ghost from Christmas past or whatever. He goes, "Okay, just messing with me." And then we snuck out cracking up, man. Lighting guy's in there. I remember he's banging on something. He looks, he goes, "Who's there?" Cracking up.
Whatever became of Lars? Did you see the show or like?
Never saw him in another show. I just remember him always being on Family Matters and always grumpy at people or whatever.
Oh my God. So I got to ask about so in comparison to say the Mama Winslow wedding episode where you're just amongst a sea of people, and then you have the Thought in the Dark episode with the Dave Koss performance, and like we can literally see you with your Koss shirt right behind Steve and Myra. I mean, you are pretty much as much as a star as them. I wonder if there was a conscious decision behind the scenes to have that happen, or was that just a random occurrence? Like how did
a lot of times they'll go and say, they'll pick random people and they'll say, sit here, sit here, sit here. And they'll shoot a few takes. And I think originally I was sitting further back, but they liked the reactions I was making and they brought me down and they switched me out with someone else. So a lot of the times they probably liked what the faces I was making or whatever, and that I was being present or whatever, or my look. It could have been any of that.
After the episode aired, did you get any recognition from people like, "Oh, hey, I saw you on television with the..."
And I do to this day. To this day, people will screen grab things from that and send it to me. I get that a lot. I get, there's a handful of one. I get people send me screen grab. I got one yesterday from Full House, but yeah, I get a lot of the ones where I was seriously featured. Another movie I did called Higher Learning. There's an episode where I come out of the elevator and it's clearly obviously me, and it's just the shot opens and there I am, and everybody sends me those all the time. But yeah, the Dave Koz one is one where you can clearly see me, and that was a fun day. That was a fun day because you don't film the whole time. You're sitting there talking to everyone around you. People will chat with you, I mean, look, Kelly Williams as Laura and her boyfriend, I think, were in that same scene. So you didn't get a chance to interact with her then? I don't think so. If I did, it was just how's the weather and stuff like that. I remember that she was, I don't ever remember having a conversation with her. If I did, it was just small talk. Jaleel would talk fairly at length. Michelle Thomas talked a lot at length. Shavar talked at length. And I think that's the ones I remember talking to the most. Darius occasionally, but mostly talking to Michelle and sometimes Jaleel.
I have to ask about Darius McCrary because one of our previous guests, Jock Bolton, who he guest starred on a Family Matters episode, I think earlier on in the first season. And he had mentioned that he had heard that like, Darius could be a crazy personality of sorts. And you had mentioned that he like rolled up in like a black Mercedes. So I'm wondering if there was any interesting animated personality that you saw in Darius that just like stood out to you from your Family Matters memories.
I just remember that he'd pull up in this badass whip and that he was always just super laid back and kind of kept to himself. And he was real suave. He had it going on. Like you'd look at him and be like, dang, he's got it going on. And I remember before he would change into his wardrobe, whatever wardrobe they wanted him to do, when he'd show up on set, he was always dressed to the nines with the most expensive like kicks or really expensive watches, things like that. I just remember looking at him going, dang, must be nice kind of thing, you know? And he was like, hello, good morning, how are you? You know, whatever. And he'd make a quick joke and then kind of stuck to himself.
So it sounds like, because I would always imagine a lot of these Hollywood sets where it's like, oh, if you're a background player, you're not allowed to talk to the star actor. But it seems like with Family Matters, there was none of that hierarchy. Everybody was
correct. I had been on sets where you were definitely not allowed to talk to the star actors, and they didn't want to be talked to, and they were not people it's interesting. There's a handful of celebrities that I met that I was like, wow, I'm very disappointed in you. Bruce Willis wasn't nice. That was hard. Sybil Shepherd wasn't nice. That was hard.
Were you doing background for Moonlighting, their show, or something else?
Moonlighting, separate. She was doing a movie of the week. And that was tough. And then maybe, I don't know if she's having a bad day, but I'd heard rumors, and then she snapped at me. And then probably the rudest person I'd ever come across, and it was hard to stomach because we used to audition for commercials together, and he was very nice, was a guy named Adam Brody, who was on the OC. He's in the Shazam movie now. He's a curly-haired guy. And that was disappointing because he was beyond rude and nasty and mean, and we used to audition for commercials together, and I was basically congratulating him, and he didn't like it because the director was there, and he didn't want them to know he used to do commercials or whatever. So that was a situation.
So going back to Sybil, I mean, I had heard that she can be difficult to work with on set. Why did she snap at you?
Well, that particular day, I was very young, and we were shooting a movie of the week scene. She was in a movie of the week, and this particular scene was taking place at a garage, a mechanic garage, and I was supposed to be one of the young mechanics, and so I was wearing a blue mechanic jumpsuit. And the director said, okay, she's going to start here, and I want you to stand. I was about 2 feet to her. She's 2 feet to my left. I'm standing here. And he goes, okay, I want you to go through. When we call action, I want you to cross in front of her, and she's going to come this way. So he goes, action. And I start to walk, and then she stops. She says, what the F are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, why are you in my shot or something? And I said, oh, the director told me to. And she goes, well, I'm telling you not to. So I said, okay. So the next scene, I don't do it. And the director goes, what are you doing? I told you to blah, blah, blah. And he goes, come here. I'm the boss, okay? I'm the boss. You do what I say. Don't matter what she says. And so I'm like, okay. So we go back and I do it again. She goes, what the are you doing? I just told you not to blah, blah, blah. What the F is he doing? Blah, 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 blah. And the director says, I told him to do it. She goes, that's stupid. And he goes, what difference does it make? Can you not concentrate with someone crossing in front of you for 2 seconds? It's establishing the shot. This is why I want it. And she goes, Jesus Christ, or something like that. And then she just went back to her thing. And I went, man, that's tough. But I would say out of the majority of the actors that I've worked with over the years, whether it be speaking roles, background, or as a magician, I have a lot of celebrity clients. I've performed for Jack Black, Adam Sandler, David Spade, Steve Martin. The bigger the star, generally, the nicer and more normal they are, believe it or not. In television, Family Matters was a show where everybody on that set was very, very kind. That's unusual. It's very unusual. 90210, very kind. Even Shannon Doherty, I don't care what anyone says about her. She was very kind. She's very kind to me specifically. So those were my experiences. Everybody was treated with respect there.
Well, I just wanted to know, with all this time that you get to spend with people on the sets and everything, is there anything that you discovered about yourself while you were going through your career early in the A phases?
Yes, I discovered that, because I've always been a very nice and giving person, and I discovered that, and it's not fake, it's genuine. I discovered that it reaches everybody, whether it's through magic or acting or whatever, that my that I rub off on people, that people tend to like me and will start conversations with me. I've talked to Jim Carrey and John Ritter the exact same way, and they're talking to me the exact same way I'm talking to you. So when John Ritter died, it affected me. It was a big deal because he was a nice guy, very nice guy. It was genuine. Same with Jim Carrey. He's completely normal, not weird, nothing. I learned in those times, I learned about struggle. Those times when I would go to the sets, I remember not having enough. I remember being on one set, and at the very beginning, I didn't have much money, and I just wanted a sandwich. And only the union people were allowed to have sandwiches. And I didn't know that. And this was before I'd become in the union. And I went over and I went to grab a sandwich. This was on a show called Weird Science. And the casting director didn't know, or not the casting director, sorry, the craft service guy didn't know that I was union. And he goes, "You can't have a sandwich." And I had no money and I was starving. Mm-hmm. I threw the sandwich into the trash. And he said, "You're not in the union." And I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know, but I already made the sandwich. Can I at least have it?" He took it, threw it in the trash. And wow. I thought, that's not cool. But experiences like that rarely happen. It was mostly, everything was positive. It was that one specific thing I remembered, it was hard. During that time, I struggled and I fought and I worked my way up to doing speaking roles. I've done a lot of commercials. If you YouTube Rob Rasner commercials, you'll see me, the star of a lot of commercials in the late 90s, early 2000s, if you YouTube that, Rob Rasner commercials. And those are people's dreams. And I worked so hard for that. And now I'm traveling the world and doing magic full time and performing in celebrities' homes, and I'm on cruise ships every 2 weeks. These are people's dreams. I get to travel. And so I learned basically at that time never to take anything for granted, ever. And nobody likes their job. When I started doing background, it was magical, and then it became monotonous. And then when I was speaking roles, same thing. Magic, same thing. But I learned never to take anything for granted and always be grateful for what you have and not what you don't have. And my main word of advice to anyone in any situation is, if the grass is greener on the other side, then you need to care for your own lawn better.
That was a great stamp to end that on.
Thank you.
I agree. So, Rob, your wonderful comedy magician work, how can people keep in touch with you? How can people know where you are?
I'm on Instagram at Rasner Magic. That's RASN as in Nancy, ER Magic. I'm on, my website is rasnermagic.com. At X/Twitter, it's at Rob Rasner. And Facebook is Rasner Magic also. And I'm very good about keeping in touch. And if you have any questions about anything related to the business or magic or anything, that's where you can find me.
I love that. Anybody that you worked with on Family Matters, either a background, crew, cast, that you still keep in touch with today?
That I still keep in touch with. Let's see. Background, I keep in touch with, like I said, my friend Deontay was in that nerd episode with me. Let's see. As you know, our mutual friend Kelly, talked to her. And then as far as the cast or anybody, no, not necessarily. But as I said, I ran into Jaleel at a bar about a few years ago, and he immediately had recognized me. Didn't remember my name, but came over and was genuine and talked to me. And that was, that whole show was a good experience.
I'm always kind of confused about like where Jaleel stands with talking about Family Matters today. Like, is he the kind of guy that has no problem reminiscing at length, or is he just kind of like, I would like to not talk about it as much as possible?
I think that he is grateful. I think that he is grateful for the opportunity back then. And I think it's not his favorite subject, but he's probably open to talking about it because it's what made him. And he's a good dude.
Did you guys talk about that when you caught up that night a few years ago, or was it just other topics?
It's like, how are you? And I said, good. And he said, I haven't seen you in forever. He said, I always remember a name, not specifically a place. He's like, what are you up to now? And I told him, and he was talking about, we had a mutual friend that he did a series with afterward. My friend Dave Ruby, that I did a lot of commercials with, he and Dave had a short-lived series, and I can't remember the name of that series, but we talked about that series after Family Matters. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. I think you were talking about a short-lived UPN sitcom that he had.
Yeah, with Dave Ruby.
Yeah. So you're saying that Jaleel, literally maybe a year or two after Family Matters, he did this sitcom?
Yeah, he did that, and it was after that. And so it was that on the UPN. Yeah, I forget what it's called, but it was Jaleel and Dave Ruby, and it was a short-lived one, and we were talking about Dave.
I wonder if it's that show. I think it was called like Grown Ups or Growing Up or something like that. Or
Yeah, something like that. Okay. I forget. I know that he was doing that show at the time, and so we talked about that, and then he was with some beautiful girl, and he's a really cool guy. And I'm bummed that I didn't really get to talk to Michelle at length, because she was so real and kind and normal that you always had the urge just to like give her a hug. And if nobody knew she was sick or anything, she didn't tell anybody. And apparently she was sick while they're filming and nobody knew.
Oh, wow.
And she's just kind, and the things you look back on.
You're saying that the conversations you had with her were more short and fleeting, and there wasn't any time where you got to talk at length with her about any topic?
We talked at length. It was like long, it's like, man, today's a long day, did you get lunch? That kind of stuff, She would basically just regular how you talk to anyone. Like if she was standing next to me, I remember one point I was standing at the edge of the lockers and then facing the soundstage, and she's getting ready to do her thing. She's leaning up against the wall, and she's probably a foot from me. I said, "Hey, how are you?" And she said, "Good." And she goes, "How have you been?" Because she recognized my face and my name. And I said, "I'm good." And I said, "Are you here today, tomorrow?" And I said, "No, I've been here for 3 days." I said, "That's cool." I said, "What's your week like?" She was like, "I'm on this episode and then that one." I said, "Great." And I said, I said to her something like, I remember saying, "It's so fun how you change from this, like who you are, to that character." And she said, "Yeah, well, And then they go, "Okay, everyone, first team," which means main actors. And she goes, "Okay, let's do it. Like, let's get into that character." And I remember sitting back, and because they switched the camera angles to where I wasn't in that angle, so I could sit back and watch. That was how I learned speaking. I sit back and watch how they would change from Jaleel being Jaleel and Michelle being Michelle to Urkel and Myra. These characters went on like that. It was amazing. It's the same thing on other television shows where you'd speak to someone, worked with background on a movie called Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion. Okay. And I was sitting in there, and Alan Cummings plays a friend at the high school, and he becomes rich later and popular. But in the beginning, he walks over and he goes, "Hi, Romy. I just wanted to know if you wanted to go on a date." He says it like that. But he was in this movie, another movie I've seen where he was English. So we're standing there in between scenes, and I said, "I am such a fan of your work." And I said, "I just saw you speaking American. And in that movie, you were English. Are you American or English?" He says, "I'm Scottish." Yeah. I was like, "Oh my God, it's crazy." It's crazy. And so we talked, and then they'd go back to the filming that and they talk. So I say, "Hi, Romy. Hi, Michelle. And they just turn it on like that. It's amazing. And it would be inspiring to me. It's the same thing when I watch Magic now. I'm already a professional, top of the line. I'll go see people and say, "I got to practice more," whatever.
Wow. Yeah, I interviewed Alan Cumming a few years, a year or so ago for a past podcast that I did. And yeah, he couldn't have been the nice
cool.
guy. And he's a great guy. Thank you so much, Rob, for the time that you spent with all these wonderful stories that you shared with us today. I think I had something else I wanted to ask, Family Matters related, but it's not really coming to me. Anything else, Andrew, or you're all set?
My mind has been blown by your stories. So thank you so much for being here. Like, this has been enjoyable and so good to just hear your experiences, because there's so much lived memory there. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
And it was fun for me to go back to relive a time in my life that I maybe had taken for granted, but it was an iconic sitcom that meant so much to so many people. And to go back into my Rolodex of memories of what happened that day and behind the scenes, especially I had forgotten about having a fever that day and the chairs falling down, the fake wall falling down, and the big fan. Go look at that episode where he's in a high school play and they're setting up for that. I don't remember which season or what, but it was a good time. So it was fun to relive all of that. And man, I hope that everybody that's involved with that show is doing well to this day, including Lars,
Have you watched Family Matters recently, just sort of nostalgia's sake, or do you just kind of want to leave that in the past?
TV, and I recognized the episode. I'd absolutely watch it. It was, and during that time, I would watch it regularly, but I hadn't seen it in quite a while. But it is a fantastic show. Yeah, a lot of my friends will go back. One of my friends that's in her mid to late 30s, she'll watch it and then send me screen grabs of me. I'm like, "I know, stop it. I look stupid. I'm young." Yeah. We're currently recapping and discussing each episode of the first season at the moment. So yeah, we agree. It's a very great show, and we can't wait to eventually get to your episodes in season 4 and so on and so forth. So thank you, Rob, and have yourself a great night. Best of luck with the career. You got it. Thank you, Jon. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Rob. You have yourself a great evening. This was amazing.
Blessings to you both. Thank you.
All right, take care. All right, how was that?
That was pretty interesting. I wasn't expecting to hear all the stories we heard.
Oh, and he was prepared. Like,
Yes.
he literally had his notes. He was like, I'm going to go through this story, that story, this story, that story. I mean, what I love about that is that, you know, he wants to come in and give a great interview. So, yeah, man, it was really nice to hear about Family Matters, but definitely the Forrest Gump thing and the Martin story. I mean, this guy has lived it all. And I think, again, you know, for you listening, if you're on Instagram, you can follow him at Rasner Magic. That's how I kind of found him. Thank you to Family Matters Season 8 guest star Kelly Vaughn for recommending Rob to us. And Kelly, we're going to be interviewing at some point about her Season 8 Passion Tree episode that she appeared on. So we can't wait for that.
Excited.
And I know. Yes. Follow us, please. Subscribe, listen, rate, review the Deliciousness Recap, Family Matters, wherever you get podcasts. And at Family Matters Rewatch Pod, at Family Matters Rewatch Pod on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Did I the Threads? I think I mentioned all the social medias that we're on, right?
I think you mentioned them all because I am still learning. Threads. You know, I saw Threads for the first time the other day and I was like, what in the world?
Yeah. Questions, comments, concerns, feedback, all that good stuff. thedeliciousrecap@gmail.com. How can people follow you?
You can follow me at AJ Vandertunt on all of the socials now. It's official. You can just type in AJ Vandertunt, including on Facebook. But just look up Vandertunt. You will find me on all the socials, Instagram, TikTok, Threads. What is that one? X? Is it Twitter? Twex?
X, formerly known as Twitter.
Yes, X, formerly known as Twitter. Terrible name. Terrible. But you can find me on there too. And you can even find me on the Book of Faces. So just look for me. Vandertunt is all you got to type in on every platform.
The Facebook, the Book of Faces. I like that. Not the Book of Feces, the Book of Faces.
Yes, I do not want to know your feces book. So don't send me that link. just don't.
All righty. Send us out, good Vandertunt.
All right, y'all. Well, this is fun and this was delicious. So let deliciousness reign from this interview.